Hello and welcome back to another video. The Napoleonic Wars. They were a series of conflicts between 1803 and 1815 and were named after one of the most famous generals in history that fought in the war, Napoleon. However, to understand the story of Napoleon and his conquests, we need to start at his childhood. Well, actually, slightly before. In the 1760s, Corsica was part of the Republic of Genoa. However, the island revolted, and so Genoa asked help from France in 1768, and in the end, the island was given to France. Napoleon Bonaparte was born in August 15, 1769. His family was part of the minor nobility, and he had 7 siblings. At 9, Napoleon was sent to study at Brienne, and at 15, he was sent to the military school of Paris. He was a very good student and graduated the next year, becoming a second lieutenant. Napoleon's ambition, however, was not satisfied. The King of France, Louis XVI, had emptied the coffers and budget of the country, and so he summoned the clergy, nobility, and third estate to figure out what to do. They could not agree with each other, however, and so the third estate, the poorest yet most populated of the classes, founded the National Assembly. The revolutionaries then took over the Bastille, a fortress in Paris, and adopted the Declaration of the Rights of Man and the Citizen. The royal family of France were sent to Paris, and in 1791, the family attempted an escape from Paris, but were caught by the revolutionaries and were arrested. Europe was against this, as they were afraid that the ideas of the French Revolution might threaten their crowns and thrones. Prussia's popular king, Frederick II, and the Holy Roman Emperor, Leopold II, who was the brother of the Queen of France, Marie Antoinette, issued the Declaration of Pillnitz in support of Louis XVI against the French Revolution. In 1792, in a desperate attempt to bring the monarchy of France back to power, Austria and Prussia signed a military convention to invade France. This was the start of the War of the First Coalition. When the First Coalition armies arrived in France, the French immediately massacred their prisoners, in fear that the coalition might have them freed. After defeating the coalition in Valmy, Prussia and Austria retreat, and the French proclaim the Republic of France. In 1793, both the Queen and King of France were executed by guillotine, causing the coalition to be joined by even more European countries. That same year, revolts happened around the country, including one in Toulon, interestingly with help from the British. Napoleon was sent there, and instead of going immediately to Toulon, he goes southwest of it to install his artillery and fire on the city. 2 days later, the city was taken back, and Napoleon was promoted to Brigadier General. In Paris, the government was overthrown, and they did not like Napoleon. However, when a royalist uprising occurred in Paris, Napoleon took them down, and he was promoted to Major General, and he became commander of the French Army of the Interior. Back in the north, France had already invaded the Low Countries and established French client states. In 1796, Napoleon married Josephine, a deep-in-debt widow. After the wedding, Napoleon left to Nice, where he found his army in poor conditions, with them being barely fed, not that equipped, and not paid. Napoleon was very motivational to his troops, however, and marched them to northern Italy, where a Sardinian army and an Austrian army were stationed. Napoleon knew the army numbers were not in his favor, and so he planned to separate the armies from each other. This worked, and he defeated the Sardinians and chased the Austrians. Despite the very fierce resistance of the Austrian army, Napoleon defeated them at the Battle of Lodi, and he paid his men using the riches from northern Italy. The French army continued to chase the Austrians until they threatened Vienna and forced the Emperor of Austria to make an armistice agreement, which Napoleon negotiated and signed himself. Once arriving back in France, Napoleon was super popular, and the government started getting worried that he might become too powerful, especially as he was only 29. So, they sent him on a mission far away to Egypt for him to try and block Britain's access to India. On the way there, British Vice Admiral Nelson tried to find Napoleon's fleet, but failed. Napoleon landed in Alexandria, and shortly after that, seized Cairo. Egypt at the time was part of the Ottoman Empire, and so Europe formed a second coalition joined by the Ottomans. Later in August 1798, Vice Admiral Nelson finds Napoleon's fleet and destroys it. Napoleon headed east, capturing cities along the way. However, he was defeated by the Ottomans at Acre. He left to go to Alexandria and fled to France, leaving his entire army behind. Once arriving in France, he was once again very popular. Later, he helped politicians named Emmanuel Joseph Sieyès and Pierre Roger Duclos to stage a coup against the extremely unpopular government. The constitution was reformed, and the three became consulates. However, when Napoleon did some rewriting, he made himself first consul for life. Back in Italy, the Austrians had reconquered the area and were sieging Genoa, and so Napoleon led an army and marched them through the Alps, usually deemed impassable. Instead of going head-on into the Austrians, Napoleon's army went to their supply line, fought them at the Battle of Marengo, and defeated them. Meanwhile, in the north, an army led by General Moreau threatened Vienna, forcing the Austrians to pull out of the war. A few months later, another peace treaty was signed, also signed by Britain, bringing the whole continent into peace. With peace around the continent, Napoleon focused on his own country. He improved the economy, taxations around the country, reformed education, reformed the entire legal code by writing the civil code, and he also improved infrastructure. He promoted freedom of religion and even had a positive attitude towards Jews. Napoleon still had a deep distrust of Britain, though, and sold the Louisiana Territory to the United States to not only fund his armies, but to also avoid a situation where Britain would invade the territory. With tensions rising between France and England, Napoleon occupied Hanover, which, since 1714, had been owned by the King of England. The French gathered forces around the British Channel to prepare for an invasion. However, that never happened, as while France obliterated on land, the British Royal Navy was too powerful. Not thinking First Consul was a powerful enough position, on the 2nd of December, 1804, Napoleon had himself and his wife crowned Emperor and Empress. During late 1803 to early 1804, countries around Europe prepared to go to war against Napoleon for a third time. Europe was at war once again. This video took a long time to edit and brainstorm, so if you enjoyed it, consider subscribing. It's free and it helps out a ton. Thank you for watching this video. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.